Comics are known for their complicated continuities, with reboots and retcons galore over the course of 75 years. How are we supposed to keep up with what is considered canon? Come to think of it, what even makes something canon? Welcome to Comic Misconceptions, I'm Scott, and I want to do something a little different today. Continuity is a big topic in the world of comics, and it's one that can be a bit difficult to grasp. So in order to thoroughly discuss this topic, I think it might be actually beneficial to take a small step away from comics and take a look at a franchise that has an interesting history with canon, Doctor Who. But first, I think a change of wardrobe is in order. Whew. That's better. If you are not a Whovian, don't fret, I know someone who is way more knowledgeable about the subject.
Hello everyone, my name is Ricky, and Doctor Who is a BBC television series all about a time-traveling alien named the Doctor, who goes on adventures saving the day all throughout time and space. The show is one of the longest running sci-fi series, going on almost 50-ish years, and we'll get to that later. The Doctor travels through space and time, usually with a human companion, in his ship called the TARDIS, which on the outside looks like an old-timey blue police box. The Doctor can also regenerate into a new body if his current body dies. We're currently on the 12th Doctor, depending how you count it, and this little mechanism has actually allowed the show to be revitalized and renewed for over the many decades it's been on. And because the show has been on for so long, there are all kinds of Doctor Who stories told in other media. There's the show, of course, but there's also novels, video games, audio plays, and of course, comics.
That's right, this video is still technically about comics, so let me have this one. But because there's so much spin-off media putting out stories about our favorite Time Lord, it can get confusing to know which stories count in the actual continuity of Doctor Who. It's hard to say that everything counts as official Who canon because some of the spin-off media has created some contradictions to the show. Just as one tiny example, in the Doctor Who Star Trek crossover comic book, the Doctor and his two companions, Amy and Rory, hop aboard the Enterprise. In the comics, Star Trek doesn't exist as a TV show, so none of them react as if the Enterprise or the crew aboard it are things that they have heard of before. But in the Doctor Who television series, there are quite a few references to Star Trek as a show.
What is that? Is that a mask? Is that a Star Trek thing?
So does the comic not count as canon because of a few offhand Star Trek references in the show? Or maybe those references aren't canon because of the comics? This is just a tiny taste of the complex intricacies of Doctor Who continuity. We'll talk about some more in a bit, but before we try to answer what counts as canon, I think we should understand what the term canon even means. Canon is a term that was coined by Christians in reference to biblical scripture. We're not going to go into a ton of detail here, but the basic idea was that they needed a way to determine which writings were actually divinely inspired by God and which ones simply weren't. The problem was that there was no book that specifically told everyone which books were truly inspired by God and which ones weren't, and even if there was, how do you know that that book is true? So it was left up to humans to figure out, which of course means that the process was very messy and not everyone agreed with each other. The word canon comes from a Greek word meaning a measuring rod. The idea was that if something was canon, it becomes the standard by which you measure everything else. This term was adopted in the context of fiction in a 1911 essay about Sherlock Holmes stories. The idea was a fairly simple one. Only Sherlock Holmes stories written by the creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, are canonical. They are the stories by which all other Holmes stories are judged, and therefore all other Sherlock Holmes stories not written by Doyle are non-canonical. I think this is a good starting place to determine what is canon. Authorship denotes canonicity, right? When Joss Whedon writes Firefly comics, then they are considered just as official as the TV show.
But this can get complicated with a show like Doctor Who, which has had countless writers over the course of 50 years. Some of the show's writers have indeed gone on to write for other spin-off media, like Terrence Dicks, who was the writer and script editor for the TV series and also wrote novelizations of Doctor Who episodes, as well as many original Doctor Who novels. Does his involvement with the show make his novels canon?
Maybe, but it's still a bit tricky. Doctor Who has cycled through writers and actors and production teams throughout its many regenerations that it's hard to say if authorship even plays a role in whether something is canonical or not. In the same way you wouldn't say that only Spider-Man comics written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko count as canon. Rather, you might conclude that all Spider-Man comics published under Marvel count as canon unless otherwise retconned or explained away. Does this thinking apply to Doctor Who then? Can we say that Doctor Who's canon is determined by the BBC, which produces the TV show and licenses the spin-off media?
Let's take a look at Doctor Who magazine, one of the longest running Doctor Who publications, which to this day features articles, news, and comics featuring the Doctor in his many forms. For many years, this was the place to go for official Doctor Who transmedia. You would watch the Doctor Who series on TV and read about his adventures in comic form in the Doctor Who magazine. That is until the show's cancellation in 1989. But wait, you're probably thinking, how can Doctor Who be the longest running sci-fi series if it got canceled in 1989? Well, buckle up, because that's not the first question that you'll have about Doctor Who. Like we said before, the Doctor Who magazine released comics in conjunction with the TV series, typically featuring whatever Doctor was currently on the air. And the current Doctor at the time of cancellation of the show in 1989 was the 7th Doctor. The 7th Doctor first made his comic book appearance in Doctor Who magazine in 1987. His comic run was the first to be scripted by series television writers and continued on even after the show's cancellation in 1989. But it wouldn't be Doctor Who if it just wasn't a little bit complicated, now would it? Shortly after the TV series ended, Virgin Publishing was granted the license to write original stories based on the 7th Doctor in what is often referred to as the Virgin New Adventures. Again, at this time the show is canceled, so the only officially licensed Doctor Who material that Whovians were going to get was going to be from the Doctor Who magazine or the Virgin New Adventures. And this is also at the time before having multiple titles running simultaneously was commonplace for BBC. While both titles did work closely together to try to maintain a form of continuity by trying to tell different stories of the 7th Doctor's adventures, it didn't always work out so well. That's why we have stories like New Genesis, where the 7th Doctor in the comics travels to the future and sees that the future has been taken over by Silurians, and in the Virgin New Adventures, they have the exact same story premise. And to make things even more complicated, they released pretty much within the same week of each other. And the crazy thing is that both titles are technically canon.
Now, most Whovians would chalk this up to the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey nature of Doctor Who, but we see this in mainstream comics as well. Multiple titles with the same character having different or contradictory things happen supposedly at the same time, but the conflicts are still canon because, well, the official distributor or licensee produced it. In DC, for example, you can have Bruce Wayne as Batman in the Justice League comics, but have Jim Gordon fill a role in the actual Batman comic. Or think about how Marvel treats their multiverse. You might say that the cinematic universe isn't canon, even though it is clearly produced by Marvel, but it kind of is canon. The MCU is simply happening on an alternate universe that is still within the official Marvel multiverse, and you could make an argument that if it exists within the multiverse, then it's technically canon to Marvel as a whole.
But if we're going to look at officially licensed media to represent canon with Doctor Who, then we're also going to have to take a look at the 2 Doctor Who movies that were made in the 60s. Peter Cushing plays the role of Doctor Who instead of the Doctor, and he's not an alien as much as he is just an eccentric scientist who basically built the TARDIS in his backyard. And then there's also the Doctor Who cartoon that was released in 2003, which you just have to see, link below. It's magic. And the animated series featured what was supposed to be the 9th incarnation of the Doctor. When the series was revived in 2005, this version of the Doctor was completely ignored, and Christopher Eccleston donned the official 9th Doctor role. Both of these were officially licensed by BBC, but are clearly not seen as canon because of how different they are.
Okay, so fine. It's not authorship, it's not whether something is officially licensed or not, so what is it? What makes something canon? Do we just say that the Doctor Who TV series is the only real canon because that's how it started, and everything else is essentially fan fiction? Wait, fans. Do fans affect canon at all?
Great question. Okay, so the 8th Doctor was played by Paul McGann, and he only received 1 televised appearance in the form of a Doctor Who TV movie. And for many Whovians, the 8th Doctor is their favorite, not because the movie was just that incredibly awesome, but because the Doctor lived on in other media in the form of audio plays, novelizations, and comics. Though many people see the TV series as high authority when it comes to canon, he was even brought back for the 50th anniversary as a prequel episode, and so many of his adventures in the other forms of media were canonized by him being brought back and mentioning so many of the people and the adventures that he had that existed in other media previously. Making the 8th Doctor and his adventures officially canon, not only by the series writers, but the people who have followed and loved this Doctor for the many years in all the forms of media that he was in. And he was brought back largely because of the fans and their love for him. In 1995, a Doctor Who fan posted this theory that we get the term Doctor as a meaning of a wise man or healer from the Doctor himself just muddling throughout time and space. And 16 years later, that nerd, Stephen Moffat, became the show's showrunner and made it canon by mentioning it in A Good Man Goes to War.
Doctor, the word for healer and wise man throughout the universe. We get that word from you, you know.
Ooh, Marvel No Prize. They gave away these fake awards to fans who could come up with ingenious solutions to explain away continuity errors. The fans' explanations were accepted as canonical, though these things only became canon after the publishers of the content declared they were. Before then, they were merely fanon, so that does seem to imply the idea, again, that canon is determined by the people in charge. It does raise a question about whether fanon should be considered false until officially accepted, or true until officially discredited.
When it comes down to it though, we may never truly find a universally accepted singular form of canon when it comes to a show like Doctor Who. And maybe we shouldn't even try to. Russell T Davies, who is the series executive producer on Doctor Who, said that he never tries to think about the concept of canon when it comes to Doctor Who, even expressing an aversion to the idea of continuity. Even recently, DC has launched a new initiative to focus less on continuity and more on just telling great stories.
And remember how the term canon got its start? How books became biblical canon was essentially left up to debate, which meant many different interpretations and therefore many different canons. While there's no doubt that Doctor Who and comic book characters have official writers and interpretations, I think when it comes to how these stories tie together as canon largely has to do with us fans. And that might mean that we each have our own personal headcanon.
Maybe your canon is just the Doctor Who TV shows. Maybe it's 80% TV shows and 20% novelizations and audio plays. Or maybe you accept all official stories as canon because you care more about the stories than the continuity.
In the end, to paraphrase author John Green, stories belong to their audience now, which is a great thing because the stories are more powerful in the hands of the audience than they could ever be in the hands of the author. What do you guys think? What makes something canon? Should we even try to find a true canon or let each person have their own? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. And if you're interested in some Doctor Who headcanon fan theories, go check out a video we did over on Ricky's channel about how the Doctor might actually be a Green Lantern. Click over there to go watch it right now. And if this is your first time hanging out with us here at NerdSync, consider subscribing to our channel. We make new videos every week that ask questions and make learning a little bit more accessible through the amazing world of comics. So make sure you hit that big sexy subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. Once again, I'm Scott. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and I will see you next week for another video. See ya.